The sound of tires crunching against gravel should have been the sweetest thing in the world. The beginning of a brand new chapter. But before I could even set the first box down in my driveway, the peace of moving day was shattered by a shrill voice slicing through the air. "Excuse me, you can't park that here." I turned, confused, one hand still gripping the cardboard box. There she was, arms folded, sunglasses perched on her nose like a crown, clipboard clutched tight to her chest. Every neighborhood has one. The person who thinks rules are their personal weapon, and I had just met mine. Within seconds, neighbors peeked from behind blinds. Some stepped onto porches, and kids on bikes froze mid-pedal. The street had turned into an audience, and I was center stage. The woman stormed closer, heels clicking, her face tight with authority. "You're in violation already," she barked. "This truck, that paint color, your mailbox, none of this is HOA approved. You'll need to report to me for paperwork immediately." I blinked, caught between amusement and disbelief. Paperwork? HOA approval? I hadn't even finished unloading the couch. Then came the kicker, the words that made my blood run cold, not with fear, but with the kind of frustration you only feel when someone's drunk on fake authority. "If you don't comply," she snapped, "I'll have you fined. And if you don't leave, I'll have you removed." Removed from my own house. The neighbors whispered. Phones started coming out. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. This was entertainment. But here's the twist. What she didn't know, what would turn this entire neighborhood upside down, was that my brand new house, my dream home, wasn't her HOA at all. And by the time she found out, it would already be too late. Just days earlier, I had been nothing but excitement. After years of saving, planning, and endless house hunting, I finally found it. The home I dreamed about. Brick exterior, wide driveway, big backyard with fence for privacy. The kind of place where mornings would start with coffee on the porch and evenings would end with the smell of barbecue drifting through the neighborhood. The move-in process felt like freedom. No landlords. No shared walls. Just me, my space, and the promise of peace. The neighbors I first met seemed kind enough. A couple across the street waved as I carried boxes. An older man down the block offered me a cold bottle of water, and though I noticed a few curious stares from windows, I brushed it off as small-town curiosity. But one thing kept slipping into conversations, whispered like a warning. "You want to be careful with her," one neighbor said, nodding toward the corner house with perfect hedges and a car so polished it looked like it belonged in a showroom. I laughed nervously, asking, "Her?" The neighbor just shook his head. "You'll find out." I didn't think much of it. Every neighborhood has personalities, right? But by the second day, I started noticing patterns. People walking dogs would cross the street rather than pass her house. Conversations would stop when she appeared, and every set of blinds seemed to twitch when she stepped outside with that clipboard. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't here to get caught up in drama. I was here to live, to finally breathe in a place I could call mine. That illusion lasted exactly 3 days, because on the morning I rolled my moving truck into the driveway, she came storming out like a general marching into battle, and that's where the nightmare began. The morning sun was barely up, and I was still unloading the truck when the air cracked with the sound of sharp, deliberate footsteps on pavement. It was a rhythm, the kind of stomp that didn't just announce arrival, but ownership. When I turned, there she was, striding down the sidewalk like a warden patrolling her prison, clipboard in hand, sunglasses angled just so, hair cut into a rigid bob that looked like it could slice glass. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply looked me up and down as though I were already guilty of something. "Excuse me," she barked, her tone flat and imperious. "This moving truck is blocking the road. That's a violation." I blinked. Blocking the road? It's my driveway. She lifted the clipboard, tapping her pen against it with the arrogance of a judge. "It extends past the curb. That counts as obstruction. You'll need to move it immediately." I let out a small laugh, assuming she was joking, but her face didn't move. No smile, no flicker humor. Just a rigid stare of someone who lived and breathed rules. Before I could respond, she scribbled something on her clipboard, And another violation, your mailbox. It's not HOA approved. You'll need to replace it. I frowned, glancing at the mailbox. It was a standard metal, perfectly fine box. Nothing fancy, nothing broken. What's wrong with it? I asked. Not regulation. She didn't even look at it as she spoke, as though the very act of questioning her was a violation in itself. The absurdity of it was so thick that I couldn't even find words. Instead, I said the simplest thing, "Who are you?" She straightened her spine, as though I'd challenged her crown. "I'm Linda Whitfield, president of the Homeowners Association, and you'll find that I take these matters very seriously." Her voice wasn't just firm. It was dripping with the kind of confidence that comes from years of unchecked control. Behind her, I noticed blinds twitching. A man down the street paused in his morning jog to watch. 2 kids on bikes slowed, whispering. She wasn't just talking to me. She was putting on a show for everyone watching. Linda flipped a page on her clipboard. "We'll need to discuss the paint color of your shutters, the placement of your trash bins, and your yard maintenance schedule." I squinted at her, utterly baffled. "I moved in yesterday." "All the more reason to get ahead of these issues," she snapped. "I run a tight ship here, and homeowners who think they can sneak around the rules find out very quickly that I don't tolerate it." There was again that word, rules, not suggestions, not guidelines, rules. And she was the enforcer. I could feel the neighbors' eyes on me, some sympathetic, others curious, but none willing to intervene. It was clear this wasn't her first performance. That was my first real introduction to Linda, the woman I would soon know all too well as the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. The next day, I found a folded piece of paper tucked under my front doormat. It looked official at first glance, bold letters at the top, stamped with something that resembled a seal. Notice of violation. My heart sank. Violations? Already? I opened it, reading line by line. It listed unauthorized mailbox, obstructive vehicle, non-standard lawn edging. At the bottom was a demand for payment. $250 due within 10 days. The kicker? The letter wasn't from any city office. It was signed by Linda Whitfield, HOA president. I stared at it, half laughing, half furious. I hadn't even finished unpacking my boxes, and already she was trying to find me. When I stepped outside later, she was waiting, standing on the sidewalk, clipboard tucked beneath her arm, as though she had been rehearsing for this moment. "Did you get the notice?" she asked, her voice tight, clipped. "Yes, I got it," I said carefully. "But here's the thing. My home isn't in your HOA." Her expression didn't change. Not even a blink. "Every home in this neighborhood is part of the HOA." I shook my head. "Not mine. I checked before I bought. This property was built outside the HOA's jurisdiction." That cracked her mask. Her lips twitched just slightly, but she recovered fast. "That's impossible. The HOA governs this entire area. If your realtor told you otherwise, they lied. You're still bound by the rules." Her certainty was so sharp it could almost cut through facts. She leaned closer, her perfume heavy, her tone dropping into something colder. "Listen carefully. You can either comply and avoid trouble, or you can resist and make this harder on yourself. I've been president of this HOA for 15 years. I've seen every trick in the book, and no one gets away with defiance." Her words were a threat dressed up as authority. Neighbors were watching again. Curtains fluttered, phones tilted. Linda knew her audience. She thrived on intimidation, and she wanted me to bend in front of everyone. But instead of fear, I felt a calm settle over me. A slow, deliberate calm that only comes when you know the other person is bluffing. "I'm not in your HOA," I said again, steady, unwavering. "You don't have authority over me." Her jaw clenched. She scribbled furiously on her clipboard, muttering, "We'll see about that." When she turned to leave, her heels snapping against the pavement like gavel strikes, I caught sight of the neighbors. A few were smiling faintly, others whispering. Some even gave me subtle nods of encouragement. It was then I realized something crucial. Linda wasn't just trying to enforce rules. She was trying to protect her throne. She ruled by fear, and my refusal was a crack in her crown. and cracks spread fast. The following morning, I brewed my coffee, stepped out onto the porch, and deliberately placed my chair where Linda could see me from her corner lot. It wasn't arrogance. It was strategy. I knew she would come. People like Linda couldn't stand being ignored. Sure enough, at 8:15 sharp, the familiar click of heels echoed down the sidewalk. She stopped at the edge of my lawn, her sunglasses flashing in the sunlight like polished steel. Clipboard at the ready. "Are you prepared to discuss your violations?" she demanded. I sipped my coffee, calm, steady. "No violations here, Linda." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're making a mistake. This is not optional. You will comply." I let out a small laugh, not mocking, just incredulous. "You keep saying that, but you haven't shown me a single legal document proving this home falls under your HOA. Not one." She flinched at the word legal, though she tried to hide it. "The HOA doesn't need to prove itself. We've governed this community for decades. Ask anyone." I tilted my head, scanning the street. Neighbors were watching from porches and windows again. "Oh, I've asked." "And you know what I found? Fear. People scared to speak up. People who've been bullied into compliance." Her cheeks flushed. "That's slander." "No," I said firmly, lowering my cup. "That's truth. And the more you push, the clearer it becomes. You don't want compliance. You want control." The words hit her harder than I expected. Her hand trembled just slightly against the clipboard, but she recovered quickly, flipping through pages as though the shuffling itself would restore authority. "You think you're clever," she said, her tone sharp, defensive. "But I've dealt with arrogant homeowners before, and they all learn eventually that resisting the HOA is a losing battle." I leaned back in my chair, voice calm but edged with steel. "Maybe they were in your HOA. I'm not." That single sentence cracked her composure more than anything else had. She snapped the clipboard shut, spun on her heel, and stormed away. But I knew she wouldn't let it end there. By Friday evening, the battle escalated. I was dragging recycling bins to the curb when I heard the sound of multiple voices approaching. Not just Linda's. When I looked up, she was marching toward my house again, but this time she wasn't alone. 2 men flanked her, both middle-aged, both wearing polo shirts tucked into khakis like they had dressed for intimidation, but missed a mark. One carried a thick folder of papers. The other clutched a walkie-talkie at his hip, as though he were part of a security team. Behind them, a stocky man with thinning hair. Linda's husband, I assumed, brought up the rear. The sight was almost comical. A parade of authority that had no real authority at all. But they strutted like generals walking onto a battlefield. Linda stopped at the edge of my driveway, gesturing grandly toward me as though presenting a criminal to the court. "This is him," she announced, her voice pitched louder for the neighbors listening. "This is the man refusing to follow HOA regulations." The man with the folder stepped forward, opening it with exaggerated flair. "We've compiled a list of your violations. Paint colors, lawn edging, improper vehicle parking, refusal to comply with association bylaws. These are all documented." He held out a paper, as though it were an arrest warrant. I didn't move to take it. "And again, for the record, this house isn't part of your HOA." Linda's husband sneered. "Every house here is part of it. You can't just buy your way out." I tilted my head. Funny, because my deed says otherwise. The man with the walkie-talkie stepped forward now, puffing his chest. "You'd better take this seriously. We can escalate this to legal action. Lawsuits, liens. You could lose this house before you've even finished unpacking." There was a murmur from the neighbors gathered nearby. Phones were out again, capturing every word. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. It was theater. I raised my voice just enough to carry, calm and deliberate. "Does anyone here want to see the truth? Because I have every document proving my property is outside HOA jurisdiction. Every single one." A ripple went through the crowd. Heads turned. Whispers rose. People wanted to see. Linda's face turned crimson. "Don't listen to him. He's twisting words, spreading lies. He thinks he's above the law." I stepped forward, my voice cutting through her shouting like a knife. "No, Linda. I respect the law. What I don't respect is fake authority. And that's what this is. Her husband snarled, but the men flanking her shifted uncomfortably. They weren't getting the reaction they expected. The crowd wasn't backing them. Instead, the tide was turning. I could see in the neighbors' eyes relief, curiosity, even defiance. The spell Linda had cast over the street for years was cracking, and she knew it. She jabbed a finger toward me, her voice shrill. "You'll regret this. You'll regret crossing me." But her threat fell flat. The cameras were rolling. The neighbors were watching. And for the first time, Linda wasn't the one in control. The next morning, I woke with decision. I was done letting Linda and her little army run unchecked. I gathered every document from my closing folder. The deed, the survey, the letter from the city, confirming my property's exemption from the HOA. I slid them neatly into a binder. By late afternoon, I didn't have to wait for Linda. She came storming down the street again, flanked by her clipboard-carrying soldiers. This time, though, the neighbors were already outside, waiting. Word had spread about the standoff. People brought lawn chairs. Phones were raised. It was no longer just me against Linda. It was Linda on trial before her own community. She wasted no time. "This is the last time I'll ask you," she shouted, her voice cracking under the pressure. "Sign the HOA membership agreement and pay your fines, or I'll have you removed." The crowd buzzed. Removed? From my own house? I stepped forward calmly, holding the binder in one hand, my voice steady. "Since you love paperwork so much, Linda, let's look at the facts. This house," I held up the deed so everyone could see the official stamps and signatures, "was built outside the HOA boundary. It is not, and never has been, under your authority." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones zoomed in, capturing every word, every page. I flipped to the city letter, reading aloud. "This property, Lot 47, is excluded from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association jurisdiction. The property owner is not bound by HOA bylaws or regulations." I let the words hang. Clear, undeniable. The neighbors erupted in murmurs. A woman shouted, "Wait, what?" A man added, "So she's been lying all this time?" Linda's face turned crimson. "That doesn't matter," she snapped, her voice trembling. "Grandfather rules apply. Every home here must comply." I closed the binder with a snap. "Show me the law that says that, Linda. Show me the document." She froze. Her clipboard shook in her hands. Silence spread, broken only by the sound of someone chuckling in the crowd. Another neighbor muttered, "She's got nothing." I took another step closer, my voice cutting like steel. "You've built your little empire on fear. You've bullied people with fake fines and empty threats. But today that ends, because now everyone sees the truth. You don't have any authority over me, and maybe not as much authority as you think over anyone else." The crowd stirred. Neighbors whispered to each other, emboldened. I never saw her show proof. She fined me for my garden lights. She threatened me over my truck. It was happening. The cracks were widening. Linda pointed a shaking finger at me, her voice high-pitched, desperate. "You don't belong here. You're poisoning this neighborhood with your lies." But it was too late. The crowd wasn't buying anymore. They had seen the documents. They had seen her falter. And in that moment, Linda's kingdom began to crumble. When power slips through someone's fingers, they either let go or they break, trying to hold on. Linda broke. Her voice rose to a shriek, echoing off the brick houses. "You think you can embarrass me? In front of my neighbors? You think this is over?" She spun toward the crowd, her face twisted, her sunglasses sliding down her nose. "You're all ungrateful. I kept this place perfect. I made sure your lawns were cut, your trash bins hidden, your paint colors coordinated. And this outsider moves in and ruins everything." Her words hung heavy in the air. Some neighbors recoiled. Others scowled. A few booed. Linda stomped back toward me, jabbing her fingers so close I could feel the air shift. "I'll call the police. I'll tell them you're trespassing in this house. I'll tell them you forged those papers. You'll be dragged out in handcuffs." The crowd gasped. Phones zoomed in closer. Children clung to their parents, wide-eyed. I stayed calm, voice level. Called them, Linda, please, let the police come. Let them see the documents. Let them decide who's trespassing on the truth. Her jaw trembled. Her clipboard shook. She spun again to face the neighbors. Don't just stand there. Do something. Stop him. But no one moved. Instead, a man near the back shouted, We're tired of you, Linda. Another added, You've gone too far. Her meltdown spiraled. She stamped her foot like a child denied candy. She screamed at her husband, at the board members, at the neighbors she once ruled through intimidation. You're all pathetic. You'd be nothing without me. It was chaos, pure, unfiltered collapse. And then, just as her shrieks reached their peak, the distant wail of sirens cut through the night. The crowd gasped again, a collective inhale of suspense. The lights flickered blue and red against the houses at the end of the street. Linda's face twisted into a grin, mistaking the sirens as her salvation. Finally, real authority. You're finished, she screamed at me. But deep down, she didn't know what was coming, because the real authority wasn't here to save her. It was here to expose her. The flashing red and blue lights painted the cul-de-sac like a stage. 2 patrol cars rolled to a stop, engines humming, doors swinging open with authority. The crowd shifted, murmuring, phones tilting higher. Every neighbor leaned in, waiting for the verdict. Linda marched forward like a queen greeting her knights, her voice shrill but triumphant. Officers, over here. This man is trespassing. He's refusing to comply with HOA regulations. I demand you remove him immediately. The lead officer, a tall man with tired eyes, raised a hand for silence. Ma'am, slow down. Who's the homeowner here? I am. Linda barked, stabbing a finger toward me. No, not him. Me. I represent this community. He's in violation and has refused to cooperate. The officer frowned, his gaze shifting to me. Sir, do you have proof of ownership? Without hesitation, I opened my binder and held out the deed, the survey, the official city letter. Yes, officer, I own this home. And as you'll see here, it's not part of the HOA. These documents prove it. The officer flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing. The second officer joined him, scanning the letter with sharp eyes. Their silence stretched into the night. The crowd leaned forward. Even Linda held her breath. Finally, the tall officer looked up, his voice firm. He's right. This property is not under the HOA's jurisdiction. He's within his rights. The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. Some neighbors clapped. A few shouted, We knew it. Told you so. Linda's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. No, that's not possible. You must be mistaken. He forged those papers. The officer cut her off, his voice sharper now. Ma'am, I'm looking at city seals and official stamps. These documents are legitimate. If you continue making false claims, you could be charged with harassment or filing a false report. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She turned desperately to neighbors, but the tide had shifted completely. No one supported her. Not one. The officer handed my documents back with a respectful nod. Sorry for the trouble, sir. You're clear. If she or anyone else continues to harass you, call us. We'll handle it. I nodded, calm, steady. Thank you, officer. Linda shrieked, stomping her foot. You can't do this. I built this neighborhood. You all owe me. Without me, this place would fall apart. But her words only earned groans, eye rolls, and even laughter from the crowd. One neighbor shouted, We don't owe you anything, Linda. Another added, We're done with your nonsense. The officers exchanged a look, then addressed the crowd. Everyone, go home. There's nothing to see here. This matter is settled. But everyone had already seen what they needed to. Linda wasn't the ruler anymore. She was the fool who had exposed herself. The following week, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. By the end of it, Linda Whitfield had been forced to resign as president. Her years of intimidation, her fake fines, her power trips, All of it had collapsed under the weight of truth. Neighbors who once tiptoed around her now spoke freely. The man who'd been threatened over his garden lights told his story. The family fined for their parked truck admitted they had nearly moved away. One by one, voices rose, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood felt lighter. As for me, I settled into my home. My days were filled with simple joys: coffee on the porch, grilling in the backyard, friendly waves from neighbors who now stopped to chat instead of hiding behind blinds. One evening, Marcus, the teenager who had live-streamed the entire confrontation, approached me with a grin. "Your video hit 1 million views," he said, holding up his phone. "People are calling you the guy who beat the HOA Karen." I laughed, shaking my head. That's not what it was about. It wasn't about beating her. It was about standing up for what's right. He nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, but you showed us we don't have to be scared of her. That's big." His words stuck with me. It wasn't just about me or Linda. It was about the whole street, the whole idea of community. Because here's the truth. Authority without accountability is nothing but intimidation. Real community isn't built on fear. It's built on respect, on listening, on fairness. Linda had ruled with fear. I had answered with facts. And in the end, the neighborhood chose truth over tyranny. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops that evening, I sat back on my porch and watched kids race their bikes down the street, parents laughing together on driveways, neighbors greeting each other openly for the first time in years. This wasn't just my home now. It was our neighborhood. And Linda's reign of fear? It was over.